Out of all of the games that people who study Japanese first choose to start their language learning journey with, Pokemon may perhaps be the most popular first choice. It is a beloved franchise that is considered to have one of the lowest bars of entry for beginner Japanese students, with the games themselves primarily marketed towards young school-age children across the globe, making them accessible to language learners at any level. However, is this series all that it appears to be for Japanese language learners? Let's find out. The first point of consideration we'll be looking at in order to assess and determine how useful the Pokemon series is for Japanese language learners is looking at how the language is found within the game. Traditionally, all games in the Pokemon series were written entirely in hiragana and katakana, likely due to the limitations of the earlier hardware making kanji quite difficult to read on the technology of the time, such as the Nintendo Game Boy, as well as the target demographic of the series having a lower overall kanji ability than more mature audience-focused games. For the earlier games in the series, the text can still be quite difficult to read for learners, and even sometimes too much for complete beginners due to its low resolution fonts. However, not only has the text quality improved with time, as of Pokemon Black and White on the Nintendo DS, kanji can finally be chosen to be displayed at the beginning of the game, leading all the way up to the more recent Switch releases where you don't even need a separate save file and can just switch to a user which is set in Japanese and play freely in whichever language you choose. A very useful function of the Switch that applies to many other games, not just Pokemon. Pokemon Sword and Shield on the Switch also offer the function within the game at any time to switch between the kanji mode or the kana only mode, so you can feel free to try out both depending on which suits you best. One notable downside with the text found in Pokemon in kana mode is that it will sometimes be very difficult to know exactly which word is being said without kanji, as the Japanese language holds many homophones, words that sound exactly the same, however have a different meaning in Japanese. And although kanji has finally made its way onto the series, due to the lack of voice acting or furigana, there is no way of knowing exactly how each kanji is read without keeping a trusty dictionary beside you at all times to consult. One thing to note about the games in the series is that thanks to the younger target audience, you can take advantage of a rare opportunity to have spaced sentences showing gaps where words begin and end in the sentence, which will help you to not confuse all the language together like in some other games. The next point we'll be looking at is exactly how the ratio of language found in text and dialogue is balanced with the ratio of gameplay, where you get a break from the constant wall of text of Japanese to study and learn. Getting this balance right can be crucial for the enjoyment factor of using these games as a language learning resource, depending on your current skill level. The Pokemon games all over have a fairly friendly balance for new learners, particularly for those who are attempting to play their first ever game in Japanese. However, it is worth noting that the series can get a little grindy at times, sometimes leaving you with hours of gameplay before finding any new language in the later parts of the game. The language in the Pokemon series is found in 4 main areas: story scenes, NPC dialogue, battle and item menus, and the Pokédex entries. The story itself is usually quite light with high gameplay ratio, particularly for the earlier games in the series. However, newer entries in the series have been increasing the volume of text in the story, particularly Pokemon Sun and Moon, which feel like a chore at times, having to slog through all of the story just to get to the gameplay. However, the Switch entries have done the best job overall at balancing varied and interesting story scenes with areas of exploration and gameplay, while also allowing you to control when new language appears on the screen with the press of a button to move to the next text box. NPC dialogue can offer additional language practice whenever you feel up to the challenge, and is almost entirely optional, meaning that you can read as much or as little as you see fit. Battle and item menus are for the most part quite repetitive once you have learned the few phrases they will teach you that are just repeated again and again. However, there are always many opportunities for new language to discover in the descriptions of both the items found and the moves your Pokemon learn. which again can be learnt at your own pace, choosing whether to read the text immediately as you get a new item or a new ability, or whether to wait later and read when you feel more comfortable. Pokédex entries are also a fantastic source of language for very similar reasons. The goal of the Pokemon series is to collect all of the Pokemon and become the Pokemon Master. And the goal of you as a language learner is to collect all of the Japanese language and become your own language master. These two goals can work together in the Pokemon series through the Pokédex, as once you have captured a new Pokemon, you can make it a habit of always checking the Pokédex entry for the new description to read, giving you motivation to keep catching all the Pokemon to increase your language ability. The range of actual language that you'll see in the series is quite varied between normal Japanese that you would see in real life and more specific language found just in video games or in the Pokemon series itself. For the most part, barring certain specific characters who speak in more accentuated, cartoony ways or odd dialects, language found in the story scenes are all quite useful language for any Japanese learner to learn. Useful for becoming familiar with grammar patterns, particle use, sentence construction, kanji introduction, and getting used to the general overall flow of the Japanese language. The previously mentioned gaps in parts of the sentences can also be of particular help to new learners, as thanks to this you'll be less likely to confuse a particle connected to a word as the beginning of another or the end of the next. While most of the language found in the story is useful, the games however contain an enormous bank of Pokemon-specific language and lingo which may trip you up along the way. Having to learn all of the Pokemon names from scratch can be a challenge in and itself, but you will also be needing to relearn all of the Pokemon abilities and items found within the game as well. Most of this will only really benefit your ability to play other Pokemon games, which can make the game at times feel unhelpful and a waste of time for those wanting to improve their overall Japanese language ability and not just Pokemon-specific language. One fantastic part of the Pokemon series, however, is that it does not only contain conversational language like you would find in the dialogue, but it also contains descriptive language found within the previously mentioned ability and item descriptions, and in particular, the Pokédex. Learning only dialogue like some games offer will hinder you in your overall ability, as you may be able to understand a conversation but be completely unfamiliar with how you describe and talk about things in a more passive voice like found in a novel or book. Thanks to the Pokédex, you'll be able to get some of this descriptive reading practice under your belt. So as you can see, there are lots of pros and cons of using the Pokemon series as your language learning resource. It is quite useful having the option of kanji and kana, but can sometimes be a hindrance. The space sentences can be really useful and helpful, especially for beginner learners. There is a fairly decent balance of new language and gameplay, with lots of optional ways to increase that ratio to your liking. You can generally always choose when the next text box appears with a press of a button, meaning that you can give as much time as you would like to read the sentence and understand, with a great balance of conversational and descriptive language, lots of motivation found in capturing new Pokemon by using the Pokédex, fairly useful language found in the story and NPC dialogue, and widely available on multiple different platforms, whether you have the newest Nintendo Switch or an old 3DS. There are, however, some negative sides. There is no voice acting or furigana, meaning it's all up to you in order to figure out how to read the kanji or find what the kana means without the kanji. Sometimes there can be too much focus on gameplay, especially as you progress through the game and the story gets smaller and smaller. There's also the negative of having too much Pokemon-only jargon. There are so many names, abilities, and items that you need to learn that won't really help your Japanese ability overall. And some characters can get a little bit too anime-ish at times, but generally are not too bad. So in my personal opinion, I feel that the Pokemon series can be a great first start for certain learners of Japanese, especially if they have a strong interest in the series, are looking for a game with a good gameplay and story balance, or just feel intimidated by kanji and want to give a kana-only game a try. I would personally recommend Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee for its overall accessibility and balance of gameplay and language, as well as having fantastic visual and audio design. It personally clicked with me much more than Pokemon Sword and Shield, and also the gameplay is quite simple, so you can really just focus on the language and not worry too much about having to level up all your Pokemon and grind through and beating all these trainers. You can just focus on your language. I would, however, recommend all learners of any level to start learning kanji as soon as possible, and if you still feel that it is too much for you, then I suggest finding a game that offers either furigana or voice acting in order to make your life much easier in the long run. Not having to guess the correct word every 5 seconds will save you hundreds of hours over the course of your studies. Now, that's not to say that the Pokemon series is a bad learning resource due to lack of voice acting or furigana for new learners. It's just that in order to get the most out of your time, it might be a good idea to come back once you have some more confidence reading basic kanji, or feel confident knowing how to tell apart homophones in Japanese with context. If you want to find out more about how to learn Japanese through video games, please subscribe to the channel, leave a like and a comment in the comment section below, and let me know what games you would like to see next covered in both the game review or the Japanese grammar video series. Thanks for watching.